We were working with parents who had insisted that their children did not need to be institutionalized, but should have services in the community. And those parents were at the forefront of assuring deinstitutionalization, moving into the community, and advocating for services. And of course, those children that they were advocating for grew up, and now it's the people with disabilities who are advocating for themselves. And that was exciting. I worked on a variety of projects. One of the geniuses of this particular Institute for Developmental Disabilities is that it was housed in a college of education with many departments and many collaborators, and at a time when the legislation was changing the field, providing funding for new programs, up to 3 programs at the Institute being one, and mandating collaboration. So we had opportunities at all levels, at the university, as a land-grant university, in the local community of people who serve people with disabilities, state, federal, and because we were primarily funded through projects that were competitive, everything that happened had to be on the cutting edge or there wasn't going to be funding for it. And of course, there were changes in technology. When I first came, I worked on something called the High Tech Project. At that time, the University of Utah had the educational television station, which is now KUED. Well, educational television in those days was filming a professor talking. But they had set up an interactive television system, and nobody at that time was particularly interested in using it. But Joseph Stoacek, who recruited my husband and me to this center, met with the people there and thought perhaps interactive television could be used as coaching in early intervention programs. So there would be a camera in the classroom, and then people in the studio at KUED would be the coaches, and they used a microwave transmission system, which was ridiculous. Nancy Glom, who's now one of our deans or vice presidents, was a preschool teacher at that time, and she would have to climb up on the roof in Cedar City in the early intervention program and adjust the equipment so that it could be the signal could go to the University of Utah. And so that was kind of an early beginning of the use of technology, which quickly caught on, by the way, and there would be no way that we could do that for more than a couple years, because then the demand for interactive television and multi-point transmission really grew. But it was an exciting time to see that grow into what technology is today, which is everything. There was a lot of curriculum development work that was going on. Again, a lot of it tied to technology, the now obsolete video disc programs and other things. But both the services and the field testing of curriculum and the types of projects that were innovative demanded a rural clientele. We always had to be cognizant of rural areas, partly being located in a land-grant university where that was a major focus, and because of programs like Up to 3, which had a mandate to serve homes, children in homes, because we had a medical services division which was drawing people from all over the region who needed services provided by someone familiar with disabilities. So in part, the rural clientele came to us, and in part, it was part of our mission from the very beginning. And I think we saw the Up to 3 program, Sue Olson, Barbara Fichtel, and the Virtual Home Visit Project take that to use technology into the homes. Now we don't even think of that as anything innovative, but before the internet was available in many communities, and I guess it still is not so reliable in rural communities, but they kind of paved the way for families in rural areas to use the technology to receive in-home services. So there was always a partnership with people in rural areas. It was a collaborative effort. Almost everything at what was then CPD, what is now the Institute, was collaborative at that time and still is. And there was federal legislation in the works that would allow services to people with disabilities on university campuses. And there was the mandate from Public Law 94-142 that services would be provided to individuals with disabilities through the age of 21. So what was happening is we were getting students with disabilities whose peers were graduating from high school. They were still receiving services, but their cadre of friends and colleagues had graduated, was going to university, was going to jobs. And so there was a collaboration between the local school districts who were serving these now adults with disabilities who still had an IEP, but had no peer group. And this then center, now Institute, at that time had an apartment set up so that it had been designated to teach independent living skills, but it was a perfect place to move what was really a classroom of students from the local school districts onto the campus, where there were many more opportunities for job placement, internships, in some cases attending a class or two, and working on independent living skills. And it was that collaboration with Carrie Doan's leadership as the really marvelous teacher, arranger of everything, and then our colleagues here that started a program on campus. And then in 2008, the Higher Education Act actually provided funding for students with disabilities and to enroll on campus courses and for courses to be developed. So, excuse me. So with that mandate and the availability of funding, we saw other colleagues here in the Department of Special Education and other departments develop the program, which is now still going in Aggie's Elevated, leadership by people with disabilities, and a collaboration across departments and programs on campus. It's just a joy to see the developments here. Again, it's the leadership of people with disabilities that have stepped up. We need a collaboration at that level, but there's no way that people who don't experience disabilities can imagine and understand all the important factors in a person's life. Now some of us with gray hair are discovering that aging is one of those things that leads us to appreciate the developments in technology and medicine and so forth. But it had to be a collaboration, and there had to be leadership from the people who needed the services, wanted the services, and advocated for the services.